It's the Offense Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. We do this daily, he said, 4 to 7 p.m. each and every day, talking Commanders and everything else in the DC sports universe and beyond. Make sure that you check us out. If you're new to the show, maybe finding us after the De'Ami Brown interview. We're on the radio at the Team 980. That's 980 AM, 1067 HD2 FM. The Odyssey app is where you can listen to us live audio, and of course, daily at the Team 980 on YouTube. We also have a podcast. We cut up clips that post on the Team 980 and at Craig Hoffman on YouTube. So all the places that you can find us each and every day. We, on Thursdays, focus on the game through the lens of each coordinator. Why? Because they talk, and thus we know what they think about the game. And for Kliff Kingsbury, he is following in the footsteps of some other folks that actually kind of in a weird way followed in his footsteps from college coordinator or college coach into the NFL. Few have been as good as Todd Monken have been so far, the Ravens offensive coordinator. And on the heels of the conversation that we had with Ben Solak yesterday from ESPN about Kliff running a college offense, which Ben very astutely pointed out is not something that he meant as a dig, unlike maybe Cam Taylor-Britt. And you know, I don't even think, honestly, Cam Taylor-Britt, the Bengals corner, meant it as a dig. But when Ben says it, he says, this is actually something I mean to just clarify stylistically choices that are made that most NFL coordinators won't. I'm not actually ascribing it good or bad. But a guy like Monken has made that change as well. Was most recently in college at the University of Georgia. Ultimately gets the job with the Ravens last year, and has an outstanding first season where Lamar Jackson wins the MVP. Offense looks fantastic again this year in long stretches, including the entirety of last week's game. So Kliff did talk to Todd Monken about wanting to come to Washington and everything that goes into making that transition to be an OC at the pro level. And he was asked today about what he took from said conversation.
He took over at Oklahoma State when Dana Holgorsen left there. So I followed him, and just the way he's been able to adapt his personnel and maximize his personnel. He's been successful everywhere he's been, and I was just picking his brain. He's made that transition a couple times from college and back, and just this time around, they had such success last year, running that style with Lamar of offense, what he liked, what he didn't like, what he would have done differently, bringing it in. And so we just had a good conversation. I appreciate him and what he's done there and everywhere else, and just watching it this year with how he's brought Henry in and adapted to that and adjusted the scheme to really maximize who they are this year. It's incredible. I mean, he's one of the best offensive minds in football, and so it'll be a huge challenge for him.
I think that one of the things that I appreciate about great coordinators is they have a set of principles, and then they adapt their methods. Principles are the things that you just believe, hey, we must do this. We're trying to accomplish this thing. We're trying to get the ball vertically down the field. We have to create horizontal space. We have to make sure that we have one matchup, two matchups, whatever it is, at all times in our favor. And then the methods are, okay, well, let's say we must always have two matchups in our favor. We have to make sure that if the defense is playing man, we have two guys that we like at all times. So how do we accomplish that? It might be with personnel. Hey, with our personnel, we're going to sign 4 stud wide receivers, or we're going to make sure we're 4 deep at wide receiver. That way, if we can get our wide receiver 4 on their cornerback 4 and they're playing dime, then we love that matchup. Okay, great. Or we know they don't switch their corners inside, outside. They're not going to travel. So can we get our number 1 wide receiver on their slot corner? Or we know if we go heavy personnel, we're going to get matched with their heavy personnel, and we're going to have our number 2 tight end, who is actually a number 2 tight end because he's not that good of a blocker, but he's a great pass catcher, great route runner, on a linebacker. And that's a great matchup for us. A running back on a linebacker, that's a great matchup for us. So whatever your principles are, how do you accomplish them? And especially for a guy like Kliff coming out of the air raid system in college, when he first got to the NFL, we're talking way back year 1 in Arizona, he still wanted to do a lot of the same things that he did in college in terms of we want to play with 10 personnel. So 4 wide receivers, no running back, or 4 wide receivers, no tight ends. Just 1 running back in the backfield, and we'll spread guys out. And eventually what Kliff was able to do, and a guy like Monken has done this as well, and I think that's why they appreciated that conversation, or at least Kliff obviously did, is, okay, we have this mobile quarterback in Lamar Jackson. There's advantages for us to go big and have blockers that we can have out in front to block for him on quarterback sweeps and things like that. Okay, how do we then, considering one of those guys is Isaiah Likely, another is Mark Andrews, guys that are great pass catchers. How do we use that to our advantage and get to some of the spread concepts that we like with receivers in college, but that we like maybe with tight ends in the NFL because of how defenses match? And so watching Kliff evolve, there was time in Arizona, frankly, as you go back and study it, but especially how he's taken it to a different level this year, it's not surprising that a guy like Monken maybe had some kind of influence on him. And specific to the personnel side of it, Kliff touched a little bit more on the conversation that he had with the Ravens offensive coordinator.
I think I was just trying to see if I did get back in. I was still at USC this time, but if I did get back in, things that I would like to do or change or things he thought that worked this time around when he did it. So it was just a good, candid conversation. A couple of guys that have kind of gone back and forth and where we thought really the state of the game is and what you can kind of get away with and what you can't get away with.
And if you think back to our conversation yesterday with Solak, I would bet that there are certain things about the run game that they talked about. I would bet that there's certain things about the screen game that they understand and get. And I heard a really good piece of analysis. Oh, my God, where was this? I don't think this was from Solak, but it might have been on Mina Kimes' podcast. It might have been someone else on another podcast. I know who it was. It was Derek Klassen on the Athletic Football Show. So, Derek Klassen, shout out to you. Klassen talked about how in college, because they run all this spread stuff, and Kliff certainly was this back in the day when he was at Texas Tech and when he was at at USC to an extent and all the different places that he was. When you have these 165-pound, 5'10" receivers that run these great vertical routes and have speed all over the field and work for your spread offense, you do still want to be able to run the football. So how do you create, whether it's good blocking angles or just tell, coaching style to say, hey, we're going to need you to go crack a safety or a linebacker and we're going to teach you how to do it? Or do we find ways to remove those guys from the blocking structure and take somebody with them so they just don't get their butt kicked and be in the way? And I think you see elements of all of that in what Kliff has done in the run game this year, and you certainly see it with the way that the Ravens do it as well. And sometimes it is like, hey, we're going to send Alameda. Now, Alameda will block, but for instance, there's a play last week. It's actually the Eckler 50-yard run. They send Zacchaeus in an orbit motion away from the run. Well, that pulls Zacchaeus out of the blocking surface and the corner who is in man-to-man coverage on him. Well, if the corner would be the guy who's the most likely contained player on the outside, and now you've removed him, everyone else has to sort, who's the contained player now, and it's one less guy you have to deal with. It's one less block you have to hit. So instead of that run needing 3 blocks or 4 blocks to hit on the front side, now it needs 3. That's better math for you. It's one less block that they can ruin the play with. And so there's things like that. There is, again, the use of personnel in terms of tight ends and okay, let's reverse this. Let's take our tight ends and run spread concepts because NFL athletes are better at the tight end position and we can get to where we need to go on the field and have it against guys that aren't good at covering. And so the screen game is a big one that Solak pointed out too, of most NFL teams and NFL coordinators that have been in the NFL bubble for 30 years aren't as likely to call as many screens. But in the modern NFL, with more athletic linemen, with these quarterbacks with quick releases, with some of the RPO options where you're throwing a screen not because it's called 100%, but because you had a run called and a screen called, and then it's a matter of which one is better based off the where the defense lines up and how many players are either in the way of the run or in the way of the screen because they can't be in the way of both. Having that willingness to call it again and again and again and make sure you're always in an advantageous situation from a number standpoint, that's something a guy like Kliff and a guy like Todd Monken as well are willing to do when the guys who have been around the NFL for their entire careers may not actually be willing to go down that road. So very cool highlight from Kliff on that, and good stuff from Solak yesterday. If you missed it, it's actually around this time. But if you missed it, we're listening to something else, shame on you. If you just had to work later or whatever, then okay, fine, no shame. Either way, go check it out in the Hoffman Show podcast feed or on YouTube at Craig Hoffman.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.